Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Public Safety and Health Committee meeting. It's June 25th, 2024 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Addie, would you call the roll, please?
Posh,
Here.
Larson, here, Cobb.
Here. Thank you. If it's all right with everybody, I'd like to switch up the agenda just real quick, sort of in the order of people's times. Director, you reached out to us earlier, offering to be here for a conversation regarding the DORA public safety plan discussion. So if it's all right, I would like to sort of jump to that. I know we have some additional council members, President Kuda, and Jim Petrus. I would encourage you guys to just chime in as you think necessary, and then once we're done with the DORA thing, we'll jump to the lead safety piece. This way you can get back to work, and we'll sort of the top of the agenda. So I guess sort of recap our meeting last night. We thought we should be involved. We thought this committee should be involved to try to set a tone to better understand and to give some public assurance that we are thinking about public safety in the on Lee Road, which obviously is something we're always thinking of, but looking at it from just maybe a different perspective. It's great that we have our planning director here. You have a higher role than planning from my last. You are
Director of Planning and Development.
Director of Planning and Development, but you have ED. You've got a lot of things that now fly.
Yes.
Underneath you. So one of the things that I think we were going to try to figure out is what can we do as a council committee to support public safety on Lee Road? And we did receive a safety plan from the police chief. He said it wasn't basically a concert-ready safety plan, but a safety plan nevertheless. Director, do you have any guidelines or thoughts on what we should be thinking about when it comes to a council-driven safety plan?
Well, I wanted, if it's okay, to give the committee a little more background on some of the other transportation initiatives.
That would be perfect.
So the city has been undertaking this year a couple of really important transportation initiatives, and they're both related and separate. The first one is an active transportation plan that we're doing jointly with the cities of South Euclid and University Heights. And that is an ODOT sponsored plan, so it doesn't cost the city anything. And that's looking at active transportation. What does that mean? That's really all modes of transportation. How are people on bikes, and how are people walking and rolling, and cars all interacting with each other. There's a stakeholder or a technical group there that's made up mostly of the sort of decision makers, whether it's public works or police in our various municipalities. And there's been one public meeting on that. There's going to be another one coming up on the 15th at the Noble Road Library. What I think it's important to bring this one up is that it seems like where that project is coalescing around is Lee Road as the corridor in Cleveland Heights to focus on. So there'll be focused areas in the other two cities as well. And this is, not just accommodations for bicyclists or better accommodations, but looking at it from a safety point of view. So that might be making sure crossings are just better from Fairfax Elementary all the way on up through Cedar and beyond. So I encourage everybody to attend that meeting on the 15th. I think what's important about this process, and then the next one I'm going to talk about, is that since we're going through state and federal processes, it lines us up for federal and state funding, which of course is a very, very big deal. It helps these things happen. So I think that's one to pay attention. The second one is our comprehensive and equitable safety action plan. Some of you came to a public meeting we had on that. We have a website. It's called safestreets4ch.com. And that's focused on, through the U.S. Department of Transportation, safety. So it's really focused on Vision Zero, zero fatalities, zero serious injuries. And so it's looking very much at crash data, near miss data. We also have a technical advisory committee there, but that's made up with a broader group of people, including a lot of residents, including from whatever we call it now, the Transportation and Mobility Committee.
Yes.
And there's also, and I can send this around to the committee, as part of that website, there's a thing called publiccoordinate.com, which is a crowdsourcing app built into the website that allows people to enter in information, comments, concerns, complaints. And it's really getting populated very well. So that's another opportunity for people to get information in. There's a mobility tour that we're hosting on Thursday that's focused on Taylor Road. But the idea there is for people to experience the roadway in all different modes. And there's going to be a future public meeting on that. For both of these projects, we're expecting that towards the end of the summer, let's say early fall, there should be some draft reports. And so I'm offering that up there as context, but I also think that we've told both of our consultant teams that Lee Road is important. I think we can let them know that there's going to be this DORA now, and that's something to factor in as part of the Comprehensive and Equitable Safety Action Plan. They do look at alcohol as a driver of some of these accidents, so I think they can help us. We should use our consultants to help us formulate plans and ideas, which can then go into any public safety planning and or other legislation that you guys want to do later in the year. So I guess I'm urging you that, and urging the public, we've got a couple of initiatives now which are open to the public, and we should leverage that so that we're not duplicating efforts.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Is there initiatives that are going on right now that are like low-hanging fruit that we can immediately take care of? I mean, so for example, I know there's already traffic calming done on that street. It's a 2-lane road, but there's still that middle turn lane, which seems to be one of the problem elements when we look at some of at least one of the traffic deaths. I'm not familiar with the second. Councilman Petrus had mentioned, I believe, publicly last night about some traffic tables. I guess, is there something that we can spend? Is there something that we can do immediately that we might be able to get some payback off of?
The answer is absolutely yes, and immediately is probably a term of art. And I don't want to step on Director Cleanseal's toes because I know that they are actively looking for traffic calming apparatus or installations. So I think it's just we need to coordinate between the administration and council to see what that low-hanging fruit is. And I also think that a lot of the recommendations that are coming out of these longer-term plans the initial recommendations are gonna come out pretty soon, in the next month or so. And I think they might help us crystallize some of those short-term action items with an extra stamp of approval, so to say.
So you're dealing with a new committee. Well, for all practical purposes, a new committee. This committee hasn't met in multiple years, from what I understand. A new council member. I mean, how do we navigate the process working with staff in a respectful way? So we're leveraging our expertise. We're supporting what you need to have done to try to see some of these changes. I mean, for example, I know many of us were prepared, I think, to vote on X number of dollars to put on X number of device just to try to take the problem in our own hands to try to find a solution for it, which may be a good idea from some people's perspective. Others may think otherwise. I mean, do you have advice for us?
I think communication and coordination is the key. Because the administration may have resources that are very valuable to your decision making. For example, what's the cost of, a speed table? I don't know. Others in.
I do. I research.
But meaning is that we should be able to share resources with each other to make informed decisions. And I know other committees have worked well in meeting often, where the administration is attending and participating. So I just think that, if we could continue to do that with this new reestablished committee, particularly if you're willing to do something in the summer months when some of these studies may start to bear fruit. And you guys are off for July, so it's a good month to focus on other things.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for, to remember.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Director Zanft, I have a couple questions. When they're doing the studies on Lee Road, is anybody keeping in mind the ADA compliance of the button placement on those ped crossing lights? Because one of the things that came up in the Transportation Environmental Sustainability Committee when Charlie Mossbrook and some people went out and looked, if you're in a mobility device, you can't reach the button. And when the trees are allowed to not be trimmed, then you can't see the light, the morning lights to begin with. So are they taking those kinds of things into consideration?
They are, and I think the more that we can, and it's good that this is a public meeting, the more that we can put those things home,
Yeah.
the higher they rise. Obviously, if there was a death or a serious injury associated with that, then it's a no-brainer. But even these sort of near misses or just barriers to mobility are really important.
And I would like to add in terms of funding those traffic tables that Councillor Petrus is talking about. We did budget $200,000 last year, or to be spent this year for traffic calming. So there is a budgeted item for it. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us about these two groups. I actually just over this last week sat down with two members of them, and it was really wonderful conversation. So it's my understanding, like you shared, that some deliverables will be coming later this year. I am fine with waiting until those come out. That would give us further justification for, taking action on that road. But what I would hate to see, I understand that those are important so that we could leverage grant dollars in the future. I would hate for us to, rather than doing something now, after we get those findings, wait until we get the grant dollars. So my preference would be that after getting those results, use something that has already been budgeted or, leverage some of our unallocated ARPA funds to try to do something in the interim before we get those larger grant dollars in the future.
If I could just add on to that, I think that's exactly what both the state and the federal government want. The funding sources for implementation, particularly for the safety plan, are large dollars, but they want those to be allocated for large projects. So on this priority list, there will be a list that's saying, $10,000 to do new push buttons, local item. Like this federal government doesn't necessarily want to fund the things that can be done locally. So I think it does fit in well to say that you guys will certainly have a very important role in providing funding for probably many of these items.
So how can we, so for example, if we have a citizen or someone, finds that there's something off with a signaling device, what's the protocol to get a ticket in your work system, not your system, but the city system, to get that repaired or adjusted? How do we go about informing people if they find something that is maybe a safety issue that needs attention? Is it Mayor's Action Center?
Mayor's Action Center is always the go-to. But I do think this public coordinate is really important because that is it won't necessarily get the problem fixed, but it will be a data point to show why there should be this future investment. And so I think a person could do both, and it really could have a exponential impact.
And I don't want to dominate the question, so if there's, so just maybe if you could help us understand a little bit the lay of the land of how the city is structured when it comes to public safety things. We obviously have the police department that does things that you would think are obvious of a police department. You have a planning department that plans for a lot of these things. But when it comes to signaling or tracking data on, if someone tells us, this is Lee Road is dangerous. Okay, so you hear that. Well, how dangerous? I mean, is there some way that we can measure incidents or things that are happening without reinventing any wheels? I mean, I know that I believe I'm aware that there's data that we report up to the state of Ohio on certain things, and I would think that there's data that we do capture regularly as a city, and some data is not necessarily for public consumption, but maybe a lot of it is. I mean, what data is available or who manages that? So we might be able to get a snapshot of maybe incidents that are happening or issues. I mean, or initiatives that are going on where Lee Road is a focus area. I mean, so it was great to hear that. But I know we're going to hear from the neighbors in Noble where they're saying that why isn't Noble a focus area? I mean, not everything can be a focus area. What are your thoughts with what I've just sort of blurted out?
Well, I'll double down a little bit on these initiatives because as part of the Safety One, they're doing snapshots of major corridors, so Noble, Lee, Cedar Fairmont, Cedar Taylor. These are all areas where they're doing snapshots, and it includes typical data sources that are utilized through the state, which are crash data.
Mm-hmm.
And that's public information. It just has to be sort of put into a visual format, which they're doing. So I think those are going to be really valuable, and those are going to be made public.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that information is available generally, and I think it's through the police department or directly through state ODOT. But in terms of how we're measuring things from almost like a streets point of view, I have to defer to Director Clinkscale because and the mayor and the police chief, because that's really their departments.
Okay.
But I do think we're going to get a lot of really good information out of the study in not too long.
Could you help us to understand your role versus Director Clinkscale's role? So for example, whenever the reports come out, let's say that it finds that we ought to put down speed tables or something else, could you help us to understand what we should expect, what each of you are going to do, how we should sort of engage with each of you?
So I think planners tend to get our hands in a lot of different things, but at our best, planners are in that planning stage. So we're doing a couple planning studies, community engagement, that's where we really shine. As these recommendations start to be formulated by our consultant teams, that's where public works and police become really, really, and they're gonna have to, and fire department, they're gonna have to weigh in and say, number one, are these things that are doable in our city? Are these things we want to happen? What's the impact to fire apparatus, et cetera? And then how do we prioritize them? I think planning will certainly be involved through implementation, but there'll be that transition point sometime later this year that says okay, these start to become capital projects or policy changes that need to happen that are at the departmental level.
Okay, thank you.
So just real quickly back to Lee Road, you said we're trying to make the crosswalks better. What types of things are we looking at?
More high visibility. There are, particularly when you get up to Cedar, they're just like regular crosswalks. So there are ways to have beacons and hawk structures. I forget what that stands for, but there are ways to make them very prominent so that an approaching vehicle knows that this is where a pedestrian might be, and even those flashing signs when pedestrians are in the crosswalk can be a solution. So I don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but those are the types of things that could happen.
It's my feeling that things like flashing lights, and hawks are a little different because they have a red light, but it's my belief that with a lot of things like flashing lights, they create a false sense of security, whenever I am trying to cross at Vostok and CVS, no one ever stops. And so I think that I feel very strongly that things that physically slow cars down are needed. And so I guess, does your gut tell you that it's pretty likely that that might at least be one of a number of options suggested in a report that comes out?
Yes, and the sort of the most recent thinking of traffic and traffic safety, it's that we should expect people to make mistakes, whether it's intentional or not. So you have to design the roadway to make people go slower.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other items, any other discussion on this particular item?
One last thing. So if the reports come out in, let's say, like end of August, something like that, do you think that we might be able to like make some inroads like this fall, have something in place then? Or are we thinking that we might need to delay this until like the spring? What's a feasible timeline in your mind?
No, I think I'm hoping that there will be items to implement this year, absolutely. There
Okay.
might be items that need additional funding that could go into a budget discussion. And then there will be those longer, bigger ticket items that we should definitely put in for an implementation grant for the federal government, which is likely a April or May deadline of next year. So
Okay.
I think we can do it in sort of short, mid, and long term.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can we move on to the lead safe? And Councilperson Larson, this is an item that we're interested in, obviously not that we're not all interested, but you wanted to bring this forward today. Can you just give us a quick background possibly, just brief?
I wrote it up, ready to go. The history of the lead safe legislation in Cleveland Heights was that it was originally introduced by then Councilmember Sarin in 2021. He reintroduced the legislation in April of 2022. And as chair of the Public Safety and Health Committee, I worked with the Law Department and the County Health Department to strengthen the legislation. The ordinance that ordinance 78, 2021, which I sent to you, was passed in October of 2022. Nothing really happened in 2022 until we got to 2023 when ordinance 78, 2023 passed in June of 23. It revised some of the language of the original legislation and programming timelines which were needed because by now we'd shot past the timelines that were in the original legislation, so they had to be retrofitted. Both ordinances called for a lead safe advisory board to be formed. The mayor would be making the appointments, and there is supposed to be one person from council on that advisory board should it convene in the near future. The purpose of the advisory board was to, quote, provide recommendations for improvements to the city's lead safe policies and procedures, to report on a quarterly basis progress and status of the city's lead safe certification requirement, and other lead poisoning and prevention related efforts to the council. So we were supposed to be getting regular reports, which we do not get. Lead Safe Commissioner Zach Ravenelli is apparently doing a pretty decent job of communicating with people. He's in the Housing and Building Department. He's been charged. He is the Lead Safe Commissioner. He's charged with implementing the program. I would just like to update it in terms of where we are right now. Currently, there are 9 contractors who do lead safe testing waiting for contracts, all less than $49,000, so we will not be asked to approve them. So they can obtain reimbursement for lead safety testing, lead safe testing and containment. In one case, the contractor's done $40,000 worth of work because the administration advised them that the work done since January 1 of 2024 would be reimbursed. So they could start to do the work. The contracts have been promised with 4 different targeted dates since March. So that's been frustrating. I sent an email to President Kuda, which he asked added it forward to the administration because Mr. Zach Burkons, who is here today, was advised that the law department hadn't seen the contracts yet. I've spoken to Director Hannah since, and now that he's aware they're out there, we may see something happen there. President Kuda agreed to speak with the mayor regarding this breakdown in communication and getting these contractors paid. Mr. Burkons believes in this legislation is written that it can deliver safe rental units for our children.
Is this ARPA money that we're spending on this?
No.
It's state ARPA money currently, but we did put aside.
which they're going to tap into. They will be tapping into that 1 million, yeah.
You only have a few months left to tap
Question.
into it.
Wait, no, not necessarily. We allocated it, I'm sorry.
Now, go
Councilor
ahead and
Cobb.
finish.
We allocated the $1 million to LeadSafe. So they don't have to spend it this year.
No, but it's gotta be encumbered, doesn't it?
It has to go into, I believe, it's gotta transfer to a fund for
Yeah.
it, but it doesn't actually have to like be out the door.
Right.
And there's no other approvals left by council that are necessary for that?
The last time we spoke to Housing and Building, they said they had enough money to work on the cases they had in front of them. And the $1 million from the ARPA funds wasn't necessary, but now it's becoming clear that they are ready to tap into those funds, so
The only other thing I think we would have to vote on would be the budget adjustment to move it into a
Yeah.
fund,
like we
Because
did on
specific-
the last
yeah.
time, yeah. That's for
but
the-
not on the contracts because they would be under the
Right.
50,000.
So the scope of these contracts is for lead testing in the apartments. And the city is paying for that lead testing?
That is correct, Councilman.
And is there any income restriction on the landlords?
No, this is not income-based. It is, I have been spreading this basically, I look at $49,000 as basically 98 exams. I've sent out postcards to everyone. I'm getting a lot of replies. Basically, I'm using the free exam dollars on people that have vinyl windows because I do not get paid until they pass. But anyone is available for it. There's no income qualification. And that's the way, probably the best way to do it because you're gonna have a hard time getting the income out of tenants.
And so what is happening with the units that are failing? Or can you give us some idea of what your pass-fail rate is?
Sure. Right now, we've done about 80, so roughly $40,000 worth. Of that 80, I have one property that needs new windows. There's just no way around it. And then I would tell you that at least 75 of them have passed. Again, I've got appointments up and down. For example, there's one gentleman who has 16 properties in the Noble Road area. We're doing them 2 at a time because with that, he's going for the 20-year exam. So he's supplementing the $500 to make up the difference. He's getting a 20-year exam for $500 as opposed to $1,000. So he only wants to go 500 or 1,000 at a time, 2 exams at a time. They're passing. I mean, where I see the biggest problem, and I've been a landlord in Cleveland Heights for almost 20 years now, the biggest problem is going to be in that Noble Quilliams region there. As I go through, all the windows are wood, and I understand the preference for wood windows from the councilman, as we talked about before. But in terms of lead, nothing beats vinyl. Does it answer the question?
It does. Thank you.
I do have a few questions that I'm gonna give to you to possibly see if you can get the answers to. I wanna know from Zach Ravanelli, how many rental units were targeted in zone 1? And then how many, which is the zone that is currently the first one that they set up for letting people know and alerting the public that this is coming and the property owners. So I wanna know how many rental units were targeted in zone 1 and how many landlords have received the lead safe certification of compliance as of today. And then have any tenants had to be relocated to allow the lead containment work or abatement, in that case, when you're taking windows in and out, or out and in, how many tenants have had to be relocated? Because that ARPA money could be used to help with those relocations as well.
So so we pay for the tests.
Yes.
Pretty obviously, and we also pay for the remediation as well.
I don't know if that's been tested yet. Not to use a pun, but
Remediation spans a lot of things. It could be as simple as just rewiping the surface to as big as taking out walls and rooms. So when you say remediation, it's a whole big thing. To my knowledge, there has not been any remediation yet. Though when I talked to Zach Ravanelli last week, he said he was working on a project. I didn't get the specifics. It sounds like he's working on one right now. When I checked the state database the other day, believe there's 3 active lead hazard containment orders in the city of Cleveland Heights. Those need to be prioritized.
And I will add that our legislation speaks of containment
Mhm.
only. It didn't address abatement, so I think that the legislation could direct us to reimburse for containment. And if they wanted to reimburse for abatement, we'd have to amend the legislation.
Containment typically is repainting,
Yes, understood.
which can be done, we can do those things, we can refer people out to them. In addition, landlords can get, I didn't know this until 3 years ago. If you work on a property built before 1978, you must by law have an RRP license, and the EPA is now fining people heavily. So you can get the RRP license for free. I know they're offered downtown at the Cleveland Lead Alliance. Homeowners can get them and do the work themselves. I'm happy to be a consultant at no cost.
Okay, so let's maybe talk about your role here.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have like an official contractors list? You obviously do not have a contract with the city.
No, there was a meeting, let's call it March, with Alan Butler and Zach Ravanelli. Great meeting, and they've done a great job lining everything up. I believe there were about 6 or 7 contractors at that meeting. Now, I can't speak directly to it, but my impression is that everybody was given a $49,000 budget at $500 per unit max. And I don't know how many of those have been done. I'm sitting on, like I said, 75 to 80 reports. I turned in 45 of them the other day.
So these have already been submitted
Yes.
to the city.
Yes. And the rest of them I could turn in within a week. I just kind of need to get the funding going. But I would compliment Mr. Ravanelli and Mr. Butler at putting together a very well-organized program. I truly believe that this program can far exceed what the city of Cleveland is doing within a year, if done right.
That sounds great.
Councilwoman Larson, could you share with us more information about the zones and timelines that are in the legislation? The best.
There is a map, and I don't have it with me, I'm sorry.
I'd be
There are
happy to get it
5
for you.
zones, and you might want to send it to everybody in this committee and President Kuda as well, that Zone 1 is the very first one that was to be targeted. And what they said was, it's the policy of the city to require all residential rental units in the city constructed prior to January 178, which is when they stopped allowing lead to be in paint, to have lead safe certification no later than July 1st of 2029. So there's a lot of wiggle room there, but we can't wait to get started on it. The lead safe certification beginning July 1st of 2024, all residential rental units constructed before 78 shall have lead safe certification from the building commissioner according to a schedule established by the building commissioner. It just reiterates that 2029 date. So, and the other part of that is it's interesting to me is there's a level, and perhaps you can explain the difference
Sure.
between a 3-year and a 20-year certification.
Sure. The 3-year certification, which Cleveland does it only for 2, I commend you for doing it for 3. It makes it more reasonable for landlords to become involved. The 3-year is the dust wipe exams, what you saw when you came out and watched us working. The 20-year is everything the 3-year is, and then there's an XRF gun. I'm one of 2 or 3 people in the city that have one. It's about $30,000 for a radar gun. You put it up to the wall, it goes all the way through to the substrate to measure for any lead paint. So, for example, some of the older properties in Cleveland, I measured them, 227 layers of paint. And yeah. Basically an inch out. But yeah, it's that's what's needed for the 20-year exam. It's a much more detailed, much more precise exam. The dust wipes, to be quite frank with you, have a large margin of error and are very subjective as opposed to objective. The XRF gun gives you your results in 5 seconds. So for example, this gentleman I spoke about who has 16 units in the Noble Road area, he said, do you think it'll pass? I said, it's really simple. My guys will come and do the 3-year part. I'll come by, take me 5 minutes. I can tell you with 99% plus assurance if it'll pass or fail, because right then it gives you the answers.
Okay, so it seems to me we need to find out exactly, we need to find a way to work with staff in order to try to find a way where we're at with this. Thank you for joining us, Mayor.
You're welcome.
We're jumping around in our agenda a little bit, and we're now talking about the Lead Safe program. And I think we've just basically kind of, I've been updated on what the program was. Mr. Petrus was updated on what the program was all about. I understand this is one of your babies. You brought it to Cleveland Heights initially. I think you proposed it, from what I understand.
Sort of.
Well, you're part of the team that did it. That's pretty good.
There are a couple different items. The one that I wrote was the requirement that landlords get lead certified. The other one is a long-standing program through the County Board of Health that I did not write. So, which one are you talking about? The landlord program?
And we've heard that both Alan Butler and Zach Ravenelli, from what we hear, has put together a really great program. We have heard some complaints that nobody's getting paid for it yet, because I would imagine that's still in process. Do you think we can have a chat with them at some point? Just to learn a little bit more about it? And
I didn't realize nobody was here. So, did anybody reach out to ask?
No, I mean, this was more of just sort of getting us up to speed ourselves.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out what this committee hasn't met in years from what I understand. We're just trying to get our priorities together. How many?
Just months, like maybe 8 months or something.
Okay, then I'm wrong about that. But I think we're just trying to get a sense of what the committee priorities should be, how to approach staff, so forth.
Well, generally, my understanding is there's a member of my staff that you'd like to have at a meeting, send them an email, copy me. That's usually the easiest way. And it's generally not a problem, unless there's a scheduling issue.
Yeah, didn't think there was gonna be any issues, so. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna follow up with both of these staff resources, explain. I think we'd like to spend the next 20 minutes, deciding what our priorities really should be. And then, see if they can attend the next meeting and give us an update and see what we can be helpful.
Thank you.
So jumping next on the agenda is really kind of coming up with our goals. Thank you for attending.
My pleasure.
So-
Please call me if you have any questions.
Absolutely. So the goals for this committee. Have you given that any thought, or should we discuss it? I do have some feelings and thoughts.
Let's hear from you then.
Okay. Well, I'd actually like to start from the perspective of the Racial Justice Task Force. Those folks have done a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
And I see some good things that the city has done to already implement some of that work. And, not in the spirit of like oversight or anything, but what can we do as a council to get some of these recommendations done? From the perspective of both the health side, the safety side and the health side. I mean, I think because this has been out there for a while, I would like to reach out to some city staff members and try to get a sense of where they are with some of these issues. I don't know, do we call a resource in? Keep in mind, I'm kind of new to this, or does it make sense for us? Because it's not like an inquiry, because it's not inquiry, it's more of an issue of just trying to get an update. Does it make sense for one of us to get an update when it's convenient for a staff member and bring it back here?
I do it a couple of ways. I do request to attend, which would be an email to the director with a CC to the mayor. If I would like to have that staffer come to my meeting, and then you work out the logistics of if they're available or not. If it's something that can be done in just a short few minutes, or via an email that send the questions that you have also to the director with the CC to the mayor, asking for that information. That works pretty well as well. Then you don't need that staffer at your meeting, but you have the information you were looking at for your discussion. So,
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So some of the recommendations, such as with housing and with public safety when it comes to the Racial Justice Task Force, and I understand, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat, I'm okay, I'll certainly hearing the answer later. But I mean, do you have like a particular person on staff that sort of looks at this holistically? Or do you sort of piece it up? Like public safety generally goes to the police, the housing goes to the housing place. I mean, do you have like a cabinet? I guess I'm asking, do you have like a cabinet that sort of reviews? Because some of these things you've done.
The way this works, and so we're, obviously we're a hierarchical, organization. And, so for police, for instance, you wouldn't generally ask a policy question of an officer who is, you'd ask the chief if you were gonna ask the chief about a policy in the department, or me as a public safety director. So most of this stuff funnels upwards in order to look at that holistically. And that's generally how it is. We try to break down silos, but each one of these departments and divisions is dealing with a lot all on their own. And they can be in on what's going on in another department or division, but they're not gonna have the whole story. So, no, we don't have someone specifically sort of tying all of this together outside of that hierarchy. So it would be me, the city administrator to a degree, and the law director to another degree, primarily that would deal with looking at these recommendations holistically once they get to that point.
Okay. Because I was actually gonna try to meet with Mr. Williams to try to get a better sense of how things were organized, what's the best way to reach out to staff. I mean, there's an item here regarding a survey for surveying the public regarding their perceptions of public safety. That was an item that was built into it. I don't know if it was done. I don't know if maybe there's reasons why maybe it would not be done based on the recommendation.
So if you wanna, do you wanna sort of get an initial sort of conversation about each of the recommendations now? Do you wanna just?
Not now, but I think that would be what I would think one of the priorities of this committee. I mean, this is something that was already good work that was done. It was done from a really phenomenal perspective. In the spirit of starting someplace, start here. And I think that would help us all just understand more about how public safety works in this city and how we can support it.
Okay. Well, how about this? Maybe me and you sit down sometime and when we have more time and go through some of this. I think it does make some sense for us to get on the same page about this stuff. Maybe we can get together and have a work session and then go from there.
Okay.
Specifically though, I might want to bring a couple of my staff as well, so that we can all sort of have a go around and talk about some things. I know different staff members might have, different pieces of input that I just don't have because I don't have the expertise. I'm not a police officer. That kind of thing. When it comes to sort of surveying and sort of that public, we are talking about that now. Getting some surveys together, not just about public safety, but sort of restarting what used to be a relatively regular survey that the city would do about satisfaction with services and that kind of thing. So we're working on getting that back to a place where it can be useful for us, bringing that sort of thing back up. And this could be a part of that, or it could be separately initiated thing. But maybe we can work that through.
I think that's a great starting point.
Okay.
would everybody here feel comfortable if I would take some of the public safety things, take some of the lead, share it with the team, get feedback from you on what we should focus on?
That makes a lot of
You know,
sense.
based on this as kind of a starting point. One of the things that I would like to see that is sort of like outside this is, you know, when you walk in Noble and talk to the Noble neighbors, they actually made an out and out comparison to, well, we have carjackings here, it's not safe here, whereas those up in Fairmont don't have that. And I don't live off of Noble Road. I mean, I hear a lot of things, but I don't know from an analytical perspective, you know, are there any carjackings there? I mean, you hear a lot of things in social media. I tend to discount most everything I hear there. But I also hear things are very safe in a particular area. They love to live in that community. You know, I have family members that live in other areas of Cleveland Heights, and I myself do. I would say I'm a couple houses away from Fairmont, and I haven't seen a carjacking. But is there some way, and Mayor, this is, I suppose, a question for you, that, you know, we can just get kind of a quick, I mean, without anybody like creating any kind of data, but is there a way that you can, you know, look at a measurement of a particular community, a data that's already captured, so nobody's spending extra time
I can
and
see
just
what I can.
and just getting a snapshot? So I think some of that data was at one point presented.
Well, all of our crime data, we submit to the FBI. We keep our crime stats. I think there's a bit of confusion. I remember there was a time when the city manager sort of forced the old chief to come into every council meeting and give a list of crimes that were committed. I'm not exactly sure why that was the case. It seemed to me to be ill-advised, sort of like a 24-hour news cycle crime TV situation that does a great deal to not make us feel as safe as we actually are. Right now, I think it sends an incomplete and incorrect message, inaccurate. But our data is public data.
Wasn't in Monticello Middle where the police chief came, didn't they put up some statistics for various areas?
At the
Or maybe I have the wrong school, but
No, I don't remember where it was, but I'm pretty sure we had, public safety sort of crime data, mapped out, plotted.
yeah, the chief had, I think he has, I don't know exactly what you're looking for, but I think he has some of what you're looking for.
Well, ideally, what I'd love to be able to see are sort of some, kind of a baseline. And then next year, sort of look at what the next baseline is of certain areas. And I'm not sure what to look at. I think there's experts in these walls that do know what to look at. And how can we, and I assume that those folks, I'm very impressed with the chief and what the chief is doing and his presence last night. There's got to be a way from a perspective of safety growth. What have we done in a neighborhood, or maybe a neighborhood does need some more attention, and what we can do legislatively and funding wise to make that happen. And maybe.
Mr. Chair, I will tell you this, council has been very helpful. At no point have we ever felt, as far as I'm aware, that council has not been, completely agreeable with providing budgetary authority for full staffing as the chief sees it. And that kind of thing. So I won't say that council hasn't been completely cooperative when it comes to budgeting for police. That's something that we have not had any trouble with. The issue in recent years has been recruiting. The issue, especially since 2020, has been finding people who are interested in becoming police officers as a career, and we're starting to see that turn around. The chief last night, I let him know I needed him to come to that meeting because I knew that he needed to have a discussion with council about the DORA safety plan. But before that, he was at the academy graduation. And we're seeing larger and larger groups of people joining our academy, graduating from our academy, and it's a really good sign. So I'll say that I think that we're turning the corner. I think the chief may have said something along those lines last night. So I think we're turning a corner. I think we're going to get back up to full strength. I think we're going to be able to diversify the types of beats that we do. Bringing back the night traffic bureau, and people are coming back that left for one reason or another. And so we're getting some good experience as well that is coming back to the force in addition to new recruits. So I'm optimistic about this, and I have to say, council has never had a problem fully funding our requests. So that's something that we definitely don't have to discuss any further. I mean, we can, but we don't have any problems with that.
Good. Okay, so I've got some work ahead of me to put things together and share with the team. I'm hopeful that we can set a regular meeting time for our committee. And I think this is what, the third Tuesday of the month?
Fourth.
Is it the fourth?
If I could make a suggestion. Having a standing committee meeting in the off weeks from the council meetings would mean that you would have a regular standing time where if there is a piece of legislation that is referred from a council meeting, that next week you could have a meeting, discuss it. If it meets your approval as a committee, we can vote to refer it back with a recommendation either for passage or against, I suppose, which would allow you to sort of have that meeting in between meetings, send it back to council for a more expedient and consistent schedule of committees. It doesn't mean you have to meet every single other week, but you have that standing time in case you've got something to discuss.
Does that seem too much to begin with? Does that seem doable? I mean, I think what you're proposing is the week after every one of our regular meetings, we have a designated time.
Yeah, and it, like I said,
'Cause you can
the way I've seen it done, you don't have to have the meeting every other week. But when there is something on your agenda, you've got the time set aside.
Well, this would be this would be one of those blocks, because we meet in the third week, and if this is the fourth week, that would work. Well, I'd like to designate the fourth week as the primary time, because then we can be prepared for the first meeting of the next month. And I'm okay if we earmark a week between the
Second.
first and the second, but until I think we really, I'm not sure this committee needs to meet monthly right now. I guess maybe I'm not the one to make that call. When do you think we should be ready? When do you guys want to meet again?
I would suggest just putting it on the calendar and then canceling it if there's no need to have the meeting. That way we can know this is a time I need to set aside going forward, and then if there's nothing to discuss, then just cancel the meeting.
Okay.
That way we're holding the block of time.
Are you talking about the two Tuesdays in between, the second and the fourth, or just the one?
Just the one.
Yeah, I
Start
agree.
with the one, and then if you need to add, you can add it.
And then you wouldn't need to start at 4 o'clock necessarily. You could start maybe at 5.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, before you break, I don't know if you're gonna do business, a couple things to put on your radar, and maybe you can put these on the agenda with your discussion with the mayor. I've had constituents reach out to me about what are we gonna do about the deer population. I am looking at drafting a vehicle noise ordinance that addresses sound systems. and following up on the racial justice task force a little bit. Someone has, and this is something that needs to get run by the law department, disclosing the complaints that are made against our police officers, lawsuits and settlements. I don't know to what extent any of that involves privileged or confidential information. I just don't know. Something you raised earlier, the crime data statistics, I know those used to get posted on the city's website. That ended in 2021. And
You know why?
why it stopped getting posted?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think this is worth exploring. And I've looked at the report from, I think it's probably Manpower. I looked at the report from Judge Costello, and in 2018, there were 9,500 traffic cases. Last year, that number was reduced to 4,500. I understand we're talking about traffic calming measures. In my view, aside from the physical barriers, the second best traffic calming measure, and the mayor just talked about bringing back our traffic enforcement bureau at night, is traffic enforcement. Because from my perspective, disregard of our traffic laws has just gotten out of control since COVID.
It's not just here, it's everywhere.
And I understand that, but we need to have a stronger traffic enforcement going on. I don't see people paying any attention to the reduced speed limit on Euclid Heights Boulevard and Lee Road, where we dropped the speed limit beforehand. So I'm hopeful that with the additional manpower, we'll be able to have the traffic enforcement to return us to some sense of sanity with our streets. Not that it's out of control, but it's a concern.
Okay, so are we saying Tuesdays are good? Tuesdays 5 o'clock, fourth Tuesday?
That's good.
Is that an,
No, Tuesday at 5?
Oh, Tuesday at 5 is yours.
I do 4.
So you have the fourth Tuesday of the month for your regular meeting?
You have the second,
The second Tuesday at 5.
so we could do the
Sorry,
fourth at
missed
5.
that. I apologize.
Then let's do the 5.
Okay.
If you're okay, we 5, is 5 better?
It really doesn't matter. So we're gonna start doing this the second Tuesday.
Yes, and do you want to do one in July or do you want to take that time to gather? And then start in August again, or do you wanna meet in July?
Can you send me an email asking me
Yeah.
that? And let's get back.
Yeah.
Any other things that this committee wants to discuss?
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the mayor for coming. Appreciate your time. It was very valuable.
That,
And we can, see, you don't have to vote to, and I'm used to,
Nope.
you have to vote in order to adjourn.
you just have to say it.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.